Today in the Smuggler's Room, we're using tools and materials of all type. Everything from XPS foam and a razor knife to acrylic and a laser cutter. There's something for every maker in this project, and that's coming up. What's up, you awesome geeks? I'm Brian, this is the Smuggler's Room, and this week we have an awesome project for you. Remember this? Well, it was built to display this. That's right, we're taking the next step in building an awesome display for the HasLab Razor Crest. So let's stop wasting time and dive in to an epic landing pad diorama. xTool is celebrating their 3rd anniversary, and they were amazing enough to send us their new xTool P2 55-watt desktop CO2 laser cutter to try out. If you've been a long watcher of our channel, you know we love the laser, and we've tried all kinds. I'm gonna come right out now and say it, the xTool is an amazing machine. It cuts an insane amount of materials, has a high accuracy live preview and autofocus, as well as a close range camera so you can position the laser head exactly where you want it. xTool works with the industry standard software Lightburn, which is great. However, it also has its own fantastic software. It can be connected with USB or Wi-Fi. There are so many fantastic features about this machine, and in upcoming episodes, we'll be sure to give you a deeper dive and look at all the possibilities. That said, I have to mention it has great features like the automatic pass-through, curved surface engraving, and can cut thick material like 20mm acrylic on a single pass. You know we don't promote products often, and when we do, it's only when we see great value for you. xTool is that product. Thank you, xTool, for being an amazing sponsor for this project and our channel. Now, back to the build. So, depth and layers is something we really have to work with. I could glue down the new landing pad and call it a day, but it won't give this project enough depth. We're gonna use some XPS foam. Let me show you. So what we'll do is we'll create a rock face surface that elevates the landing pad, and now we'll start to sculpt away. You know, as I do this, I'm thinking it might be a really good idea to glue these pieces together so that I get a nice consistent transition between one and the other. So let's get this stuff glued together. Hot gluing this amount of XPS foam together is really not the best way to do it. It would be better to do something like liquid nails or some kind of other version of that to get big pieces like this. But I don't have any of that, so I'm gonna go ahead and just do it with the hot glue, because all I really need to do is just keep it together a little bit. Just has to have a little strength, and that'll be fine. It's glued together. It's stiff enough that I can make the cuts. I left it in 2 halves. I'm gonna go ahead and use a hot wire knife. Now this is a very inexpensive hot wire knife. I'll leave some links in the description. If you didn't want to use that, you could easily use a blade, but this makes quick work of it. Are you enjoying our content? Did you know that it's only made possible by the amazing group of people over at the Smugglers Guild on Patreon? It's those generous people that give us the opportunity to build great projects and bring them to you here on YouTube. Thank you, Guild members. You have no idea how much we appreciate it. Give some layers and dimension to it. And by the time we get some Sculptamld on here, it should look pretty good. We have some rock texture we've cut in with a knife. The next thing we need to texture is the foam. And what better way to texture foam to look like rock than to use a rock? You can see on this one that we finished that we've got a lot of different texture, or even managed to get some cracks, just like you would have on a surface. We're well on our way to creating texture of rock. Rock always has some sort of crack. So if we take the blade and we kind of just work it in, take another really small sliver, and then tweezers, we can pull out sections to leave little deep crevices. So you can see we have various angles, and that adds a little bit more, in my opinion, interest in the rock face. Alright, the next step is to apply a layer of Mod Podge. We're going to use a little water to thin it down, and I've got some ink and some latex paint. I want to get this to about the consistency of milk, maybe just a slight bit thicker than that. Okay, we've got a couple of coats on here. Nice and hard, and now we're going to take a mixture of some different sand and rock, and we're going to use a little scenic cement. And then I've got a container of isopropyl alcohol to help thin out the glue. Get a little dropper here. And just hit it with a little isopropyl. All of the rock now is dried. We let them sit for about 12 hours. Now we're just doing a test place of the landing pad. And one of the things I want to do next is cut this area here out. We're going to do some recessed kitbashing out of model pieces. I did the laser cut of the landing pad. I saved this piece. This will work really great to build our details on, and then we'll be able to recess this down inside the cutout. Alright, so I got a few different tools. Flush cutters, tiny handheld saw, Exacto blade, and then I've got all kinds of different kitbash model pieces. And what we're going to do is just try to take this piece and lay out some interesting designs over the top of it. Alright, there we have it. So I added in this little piece of brass and a whole bunch of little details to try to fill in all the space. But the magic happens when you do this. All it takes is a little primer and everything changes. Alright, here's a little test bit so you can see how it's going to sit down inside the landing pad. I 3D printed some of these little guys. They're kind of those little iconic pieces you see in like the hangers, and what we can do is we can put some lighting underneath them and then get a nice glow out of those. We'll do 4. One thing I do have is a whole bucket full of plaster molded rocks. Before I put the Sculptamld around, I was going to just scatter some of these rocks around the perimeter just to give it a little bit more, I don't know, just to add a little bit to it. Otherwise it'll look a little plain if it's just all flat. I had this failed print. It started to shift on me and the whole bottom part failed. So now it sits sideways, and so I can put it over here in the corner, and then I'll build up the Sculptamld around it. Sculptamld, here it is. Basically, the mold compound with plaster and a mix of other shards of material. We're gonna add some water to it, okay? And then we can mix that up. There we go, so now we got kind of a mushy paste consistency. And then we're going to do one more thing. We're going to add some paint to this. This is a Liquitex paint, and I'm going to add some burnt umber, and I'm going to add some black. For some reason, it gets chipped. The underlying color won't be stark white from the plaster. Now the application for this is pretty simple. We're going to take the mold compound, the Sculptamld, and we're just going to push it all down onto the surface. Okay, all the Sculptamld is down, and I will tell you that this is absolutely one of those trust the process types of things. It always looks a little funky to me, and I'm a little worried that I've ruined the project. But by the time it dries and we add sand and paint, it'll look just like ground. Our Sculptamld layer has fully dried, and I went ahead and sprayed it all with a flat black primer. And here you have it, my friends. The piece has a zenithal highlight to it. I also wanted to point out what that Sculptamld actually achieved. As you can see, there's a lot of great looking ground texture. It does give you a whole bunch of layers and depth to the actual ground. Okay, for this first step of painting, I'm going to use the airbrush, and I'm going to use inks. The airbrush inks is something I picked up from Jeremy with Black Magic Craft. So I've got some oranges, some yellows, and what happens is it goes on really vibrant, but then it'll dull. But I'll start with the black and get into some of those recessed areas, those shadow areas, and follow our zenithal highlight. All right, we got all the shadow in. Now it's time to dive in with a little burnt umber. Here we are after the burnt umber and the black for the shadows. I wanted to give you a look at the surface now that we've hit it with a few different types of paint through the airbrush. The next step here is to give the entire project a wash. We're going to mix up some water mixable oil paints, but we're going to mix them with an odorless paint thinner. And you just mix in the thinner to get the consistency that you're after. Work the wash into these cracks and crevices. The next step in the process is to do some dry brushing. I'm going to go ahead and start with a bone white, and we'll put that on our brush. In this case, it's a makeup brush. They actually make dry brushing brushes. This makeup brush will work for what we're trying to do. As we hit these edges with the brush, we get some of those subtle details to pop out. Okay, there you have it. For the most part, I'm really thrilled with all the different texture that comes out after doing that on the rock. It's time to add some sand. And then we need to put a little cement in here. On a project this size, the drip system wasn't working, so I switched to a spray bottle. That allows me to get the PVA glue down a little easier and make sure I got everything coated. Now I know what you're saying. Brian, it isn't finished, man. It can't be. Where's the lighting, the crates, the small details, and most importantly, how does this fit on the previously built base? You're correct. And as much as I hate to say it, you'll have to wait for yet another episode for us to finish this project. In the final stages, there are just way too many specific and very cool details that we want to show you how to create for your own projects. So as you're watching this, we are actually working on that final stage of the project, and we're going to be able to deliver that to you very soon. We want this to be the ultimate display for the HasLab Razor Crest. But in order to see that, you're going to have to hit the subscribe button and come back the next time we build something out of nothing.